countries have brand managers. They have people that go to other countries and represent them and represent things that they're known for. So this sort of model exists at all levels. So the country level brand. So this is a joke. So the joke is European heaven and hell. So in heaven, the mechanics are German, the chefs are French, the police are British, the lovers are Italian, and everything is organized by the Swiss. And what they're doing here is they're keying on things that we know about these countries and we respect and value. In European hell, the mechanics are the French, the police are the Germans, the chefs are the British, the lovers are the Swiss, and everything is organized by the Italians. And why I've sort of brought this up is that you'll see here in the positive, yes, the French have an international brand of being good cooks, of having good food. So when we think of France, that sort of fits with our vision of what it is to be French and what it is to visit France. It's part of their brand. Also part of their brand is the negative. They're not really known for their cars and for a bunch of other things. So brand kind of works on both sides, and how you manage those less desirable elements is a really important part of how you manage your brand. The other thing that's very important is when you have something that's really significant and core to your brand as a country, as a company, as a person, if you do something that is disconnected and doesn't fit with that, people have a very negative response. So I want to use that to kind of come down to this story. Has anybody heard about the VW scandal?
Yeah.
So, I'm turning the volume up a little bit here. So basically, they were caught cheating on emissions tests. And because of that, and because they've been sort of the gold standard of automobiles and of like precision and responsible engineering, they've lost, I think, 30% of their stock value because of this scandal. If it had been a different company that was maybe a little less well-known, it might not have been so negative. But specifically because it's Germany, it's VW, there's been a really strong backlash against the company, but also against the country. People have had quite a lot of conversations about, is the era of German automobile engineering coming to a close? And that has real implications. Because when a country's global popularity dips by 1%, its exports fall by 0.5%. So it sort of all ties together. And this doesn't just happen with countries, it happens at all different levels. But I think this is kind of a good example of why brands are important, people's perceptions are important, and how if you created a sort of expectation, then it's really important that people feel that you're following through and that you sort of maintain and support that brand. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So actually, Mariah, if somebody has a question, can you raise your hand for me? Because I can't see them as well as I can see you.
Anyone have a question?
Okay.
No, not yet.
Okay, we're good.
Can she hear us?
Okay.
Yes, you can hear us.
So I want to talk now about companies or organizations. So every company, I should say every brand, every well-known or established company has a set of things that we kind of think about them. And they can be specific to the audience that's coming in, I should mention that some companies have multiple brands underneath them. So they might have one brand that's very child friendly, they might have another brand that is intended for a different audience, but broadly, each sort of individual brand has a set of attributes. So McDonald's is a good example. It has a set of attributes we all kind of intuitively recognize. Just to kind of put a few out there, and I'm going to come, this sort of an exercise, so I'm going to come right back to it. What's that here? So McDonald's is fairly well known for being family friendly, child friendly, for being affordable, for being welcoming to all, including teenagers and people that have been working the night shift and are entirely clean, you know, and all of that sort of larger community of people. And it's very consistent. It's actually, if you don't know the story, the basis of McDonald's really is that when it was founded, the founder started just making every McDonald's be pretty similar, and that had never been done before, and people loved that they would get the same experience from one to the other. So consistency is a big factor in kind of the McDonald's brand. And Starbucks, different brand, but some of a similar quality, at least. The familiarity and the consistency is a very big factor. And Starbucks is also known for being very welcoming. It isn't known for being welcoming to all. I mean, they don't necessarily kick people out, but it's really geared towards a certain type of person, a certain, you know, certainly it's not known for being affordable, so that has a limiting factor as well. And I should also mention that it's very comfortable, that it's a place where people feel at ease spending a lot of time. So those are all kind of part of what we might consider brand elements of those two companies. I want to use them to go a little bit deeper into like how you identify a brand. We're going to come back to this as sort of an exercise that you guys can do yourself. So I'm going to switch really fast to...
Jasmine, before you go, I see
Yeah.
On that slide you have Jasmine, if it doesn't work right, make it right.
Oh yeah, that's another big thing for Starbucks is if you don't like it, they will make it right. So this happens to me all the time.
Huh.
That certain Starbucks, their machines aren't calibrated right and it's not strong enough. So if I go up and I say, I need another shot, they'll just give it to me. They don't nitpick or if I don't like it at all, they'll pour it out and make another one. Big part of their brand.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume they do that with every customer who is picky.
Yeah.
Pardon?
I do that a lot.
Okay.
Not a lot, but like sometimes like it's just not. It's gross. I mean, you paid $4 for something, you want it to be good.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. So Starbucks MO is, if you don't like it, we'll fix it for you.
Yep.
And that keeps people coming back. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Sure. So I want to use those two to sort of outline a model for how you can think about your brand, whether it's your personal brand or a brand of your company or a place you volunteer, etc. And this is just a simple overview of it, and we can go further into it if you want later. So there's basically three elements. One are your leading brand attributes, things that are really important and the sort of shortcuts for what people should know about you or your company. They should all be accurate, authentic, clear, positive, and value, meaning things that people care about. It's incredibly important that everything in this category be something that you can deliver on, because as we were talking about before, if people feel that you aren't living up to your brand, the response can be extremely negative. So and then this sort of far category is the watch list. So these are brand attributes that can be negative that you simply need to be aware of. So let's go back to the countries. England, not known for its food. So the tourism board of the United Kingdom shouldn't have a culinary tour as one of the highlights of what they're offering, particularly not on social media because people would make fun of it. So knowing what people perceive you as not being very good at is a very important part of being successful, especially online. Because when people see there's sort of a disconnect or a dissonance, if you say something about something they don't think you do well, it can cause a really strong backlash. And I have innumerable stories, some very entertaining and some sort of sad, about how brands who asked for feedback about something that they weren't good at, or where people had kind of a negative impression, and it really did sort of backfire on them in some important ways. So in the holding pen is sort of anything that isn't in your lead brand attributes and isn't something that you have to watch out for. And you can kind of just dump everything there that is still a relevant factor for who you are or who your company is. So to sort of go through this exercise, I listed out a few of the things that I talked about. McDonald's, affordable, consistent, family-friendly, welcoming to all. And in contrast, Starbucks has a reputation of being a little bit elitist and not being affordable. So if I was doing this for Starbucks over here, I would have those as elements of concern, not negative, because in many cases people like it that they are elitist. I can figure out how to type that. And don't really care as much that they are not as affordable. But it's important when you're managing a brand to be aware of those kind of red flags or those watch list items.
Question.
Yes.
What if you're trying to change your brand? Is that possible?
I think generally speaking, especially like when you're at this point in the exercise, your brand should be pretty well established. You can, in this sort of holding pen area, sort of say, we're working on these things. And in fact, that can be the basis of some really exciting social media campaigns. But it shouldn't be a new part of your brand until you've launched that sort of effort and have really made sure that you can deliver on the brand. So, for example, if Starbucks wanted to decide to sort of pitch itself as affordable, they'd have to have that campaign in place and start pushing that out before they would ever sort of express themselves as we're affordable, if that makes sense. There are a couple of instances where brands have kind of owned up. For example, what was it? Was it Papa John's? I think it might have been one of those pizza companies. Domino's, that's right. So they were like, yeah, our pizza isn't very good, and we're gonna own up to that, and we're gonna make it better. But they didn't start saying our pizza's great. They started saying we're working on making it better. So their brand was still not our pizza's amazing. It was we're making it better. Sorry?
It seems like a strange brand. Working on it. I mean, is that really good business practice to say we're working on it? I mean, how long can you sustain the working on it?
I don't think it's very common. They're pretty unusual. But I guess my point is that generally speaking, you should have your brand defined before you start any sort of a campaign to kind of outline what your brand is.
Okay.
So it's sort of a little bit, further down the road that, than kind of identifying your brand. And we're going to talk about like how to define a brand in a couple of minutes. So this is a kind of preview of something that we can do, or you guys can do yourselves. But does it broadly speaking make sense before I go back?
Yeah.
these just photos. So the personal or individual brand follows a lot of the same kind of guidelines. It sort of starts with evaluating your attributes and characteristics, kind of going back to this I don't know, 3-column sheet here. It's, as an individual, if you haven't done any kind of brand building, it can be a little daunting. I have a sheet that I'll send out afterwards that allows you to kind of walk through 4 different categories. Let me pull those up. I think I might have put it away. But your personality, your skills, your kind of goals and elements of your person, if you will, sort of immutable qualities. And you can kind of go through that and identify things that you think fit into those leading positive brand attributes and winnow it down to the stuff that's relevant for your brand. And again, we'll go a little bit further into that. But really your goal is to use all of those terms and elements of your experience and elements of your personality to create a value proposition, to create a brand that is going to be well regarded by the people that you want to communicate with. And once you've kind of done that, then your next step is to make sure that it resonates. Always test out your assumptions, especially about yourself as a person. Ask your family, a few friends, and sort of say, does this fit what you think about me? At least on the positive side, so that if there is a red flag or something, you kind of get a chance to talk that through before you start talking about something. Don't mistake me, you can also reinvent yourself if your family has opinions that where you've evolved and changed. But you do want to make sure that you're representing an accurate, authentic, truthful version of you.
Question.
Yes.
So this brand you, is this a brand that covers both your professional life and your social life, or is it just professional?
You can have multiple brands for yourself. Usually, in this sort of context, we're talking about something professional, but with social media in particular, those can kind of blur. So, for example, for myself, like I have a professional brand that is, where it doesn't touch Facebook, it doesn't really touch, Twitter all that much, that is a little bit more conservative. And then there's the people that I have professional interactions with who I also know on Twitter, know on Facebook, and that's definitely not as formal because I know them socially, and it would be ridiculous to try to maintain that in that setting. Does that make sense?
It does. And it's interesting. Last week we heard This American Life interviewing 2 teenage girls in high school who are using Instagram to build their brand, and they're doing it every single day, every minute.
Yeah. Well, Instagram is a great example. There are a couple others where they're very visually driven, and that's a really significant part of like kind of the shorthand that I was talking about with brands is just being able to give people a really fast impression of you without having to use too many words. So when we get to like the building the online brand part, those are definitely good channels if you're a visual person, or if you just want to kind of think through the elements of kind of who you are that you want to accent. I'm not at all creative, but a lot of my friends are, and they, it's part of who they are. They create these wonderful kind of montages and mixes and everything that really tells you a lot about who they are.
So
So.
before you go on, could you tell us what your brand is?
Well, this is of course the thing. So let me tie that into a little bit more of the professional conversation, and then I'll answer your question if that's okay.
Okay.
So to sort of create and to give an example of this, I'm going to talk about two different professions that I work with, people I work with who are in these jobs. And the same person can hold both of these jobs, let's say. They're definitely a different skill set, but I've met people that have done both. So the first is being a project manager. And the skill set for being a good project manager is that you're organized, you are able to be assertive, and you're able to direct people and talk to people in a way that makes them like you. And that means that you have to be able to tell programmers what to do and make them not hate you, and tell customers that things have gone wrong and have them not hate the company. And in addition to just the basic skills for that, there's also kind of, I would consider it almost like a brand for that profession, is that you have to pretty consistently be, I'm on top of this. So you can't say, oh, dude, I totally forgot about that, because that doesn't fit with what people need from you. They need you to be on top of it, even if you really aren't. And that's an element of kind of that profession. There's another profession called user experience, where you help figure out how users interact with websites and tools and make sure that things are working the way they ought to and improve things, and sometimes help with products that are in development. And in that role, you need to be empathetic, to be open so that people will talk to you and give you feedback. You need to not be directive, because then you can lead them astray. So it's almost the opposite in some ways, but it can still be the same person. They're just expressing a different side of who they are. And so in this instance, that person's brand is different, and their response to that, oh, I totally forgot something. It's okay to forget something if you're a user experience person, if it helps you connect with the person that you're interviewing and talking to. So you can see how, these are two sort of very separate professional roles, but those can be the same person. So when you think about your own brand, it's not like you can only have one. It's just that it's helpful to kind of look through the things that you know about yourself, pick a set of those, and try to, forge them into something that at least professionally and at least related to the job that you're seeking or the role that you're seeking, kind of fits those professional goals. So, does that make sense?
Yes.
Everyone understand that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, we're good.
Okay. So, to answer your question, Mariah, my brand when I'm working with clients is almost always very helpful, knowledgeable, willing to do a little extra to make sure they're happy, and firm, because sometimes you have to be. And that's, of course, one version, because I do another type of work that is quite different and requires being kind of aloof and more directive and a little distant for it to be successful.
How do you manage these?
I want to say that my online brand, sorry?
How do you manage these different brands of yours?
It's not so much that you're not keeping track. It's just things that you kind of key on. And the relevance of this, as we come into the online side, is you need to find a voice in your online communications that is authentic, but also kind of fits what it is that you're trying to do. For individuals, there's a lot more freedom. I mean, you can be kind of glib and funny, or you can be sort of serious. Generally speaking, people are going to be receptive, but that voice element, how you communicate online, is tremendously important when you talk about companies and their brands. Because people respond in a very personal way to the brand of a company or a nonprofit. Even though it's an organization, they still want that sort of human interaction. And being able to sort of outline a brand and then communicate using a voice that that sort of persona would use makes people feel more positive, more connected to the brand. They're less likely to complain, and they're just generally more likely to be a supporter. So I want to continue on this, and we can keep, we can come back, but just to go really quickly through these elements of brand, and this, of course, is also true for companies. It's just a little bit more true for people, that your brand needs to be, as I said earlier, accurate, authentic, positive, memorable, quotes. So, accurate and authentic. Don't promise something you can't deliver. Don't be aspirational. Don't say, I'm not really organized, but I aspire to be, so I'm going to put it in my brand. No. Maybe later, but if you're not good at it now, it shouldn't be in your brand. This is true of companies as well. When they overpromise, it's very negative. You don't need to share the full blah to be accurate and authentic. You just need to be, able to communicate sort of what's good about you. So positive, this is the best version of you. You can certainly include a little bit of, self-effacingness if that's an element of your personality and you think that's something you want to share in your brand, but that's still positive in a way. You want to make sure that you're kind of elevating the strongest and most significant parts of you. But only the pieces that are relevant. Now, we all have lots of things that are true of us, but we want to pick, for your brand, whether it's personal or professional, the things that are relevant to other people. For individuals, I teach this as a class on personal brand. An example might be you're a nurturing person. That's relevant if you're in a job where nurturing is an important part of that role. Some kind of care or service, or as I was saying before, a job where being empathetic is important. But in most positions, nurturing isn't necessarily the first, second, fifth, or 20th thing that you should list. So make sure that what you include is relevant. And memorable. So it needs to be something that makes sense to people and is interesting. Obviously, there are a ton of things like being a self-start that we hear a lot about. That's not necessarily unique. So I'm not saying everything needs to be unique, but it's helpful if you could kind of identify things that make you a little bit, if not totally special, at least in some cases differentiate you from other people. Also sustained. Whatever it is you decide to say about yourself, say it quickly. So all of this leads to like a personal branding statement. And this is a bit of a workshop thing, so I'm just gonna leave you guys with this and some instructions on how you can kind of work through all of this. A lot of people end up just using this as a way of kind of defining how they might approach a particular job. So it's most relevant, I think, particularly for people in college in that way. But as you get further and further kind of up the ladder, having an online presence that represents you professionally becomes more and more important. My last boyfriend does like a lot of public speaking, and he has a whole brand around it. He's kind of quirky, funny, and he always starts with a joke, and he has it's a big part of his professional life. So I think kind of as you move along, sometimes you start with something very simple when you're early in your career, and then you kind of evolve as you go along. So I like to think of this as like a brand notebook. And because social media kind of falls under this umbrella for me, you can make it a brand and social media notebook, but kind of identifying your goals and plans. This can be professional and personal. It can be short-term, it can be medium-term and long-term. Be sure that you're adding constantly key descriptors of your awesomeness, because it's quite difficult to come up with your awesomeness and write out a list of 20 things. But if you're kind of constantly thinking, oh, I'm really good at that, or this is something that I think is special about me and I want to make sure that I communicate that, it's helpful to have it written down. Lists of networking options, online and offline, ways that you can kind of practice your brand and how you communicate it, success stories, contact lists, etc. So a couple of cautions. Be honest, focus on knowing your challenges. Moderating isn't successful about you. Owning what you like or can't change. So, but by that, I mean something that maybe is a negative in some way. You either can't change it or don't want to, so that you're kind of aware. For example, if you're just a sort of loud and aggressive person, own it. Make it part of your brand. But be sure that that's something that you can't mitigate before you just, roll it into your kind of brand statement. These are pretty broad, but I just want to state them. And there are some much more detailed, more detailed versions of these specifically for social media. Things that you shouldn't do in social media. Actually, Mariah, have you done that talk already? Like the no-nos of social media?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
We talk generally about when social media goes bad, but usually in the context of things that people do that are seemingly innocuous that get a negative response for no apparent reason. Whereas the stuff you're putting here, well, maybe that actually does require a response.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll also come back to that then in a little bit. But these are some broad barriers. Online, in particular, but other places as well. Being too complimentary, really not ideal. It sometimes ends up just feeling insincere. Overly agreeable, same problem. Being needy, can you help me? Would you like this for me? That kind of stuff. Pushy, aggressive, and also the all about me. In particular with social media, if you're always posting things about yourself but not responding, that's usually not a good way to build your relationships. I had a client and we looked at their social media feed, and it was every 4 days they were come to our conference, it'll be amazing, our conference is super cool, and they never replied to anybody or interacted with anyone. I was this is not an advertising platform, it's a conversation. And so they were able to eventually figure out how to invite people to share ideas, and they would retweet people and otherwise just engage. So don't be the all about me.
For the top one, being too complimentary, I mean, yeah. We've had conversations in this class about the dark side of the internet, like trolls and hackers.
Yeah.
I don't understand why being too complimentary is a problem.
It's a hesitation, not a no. It's a just be sure, because if you're too complimentary and you're doing this in an online setting, it often seems a little insincere.
So what, you should throw random insults just to make it more realistic?
No. It's more that you just want to be aware that in some cases, some people take that too far. It's with all of these things. Sometimes you do need help, so you're like reaching out, please support me, and that's okay. You just can't be constantly needy. And the same with being too agreeable or too complimentary or anything along those lines. Because there's no facial expressions, because there's no tone, like intonation with online communication, it's important to be sure that the way that you're communicating doesn't seem disingenuous. So I wouldn't say that you shouldn't be complimentary, just that if that's all you're doing, that's probably something you want to reconsider.
Oh.
There's a whole set of people that just do things, oh, that's super awesome, that's super great, etc., etc., etc. And it isn't the same as really having a conversation, which is a big part of what it is to be successful online.
Okay, so this actually, what you're really talking about then, at least from my perspective, is inflationary language, where a language becomes more valuable if it's reserved only for those situations where it's appropriate. Whereas if you're giving compliments for anything and everything, then it devalues it.
Precisely.
Okay.
Precisely.
All right, thanks.
Speaking of inflation, these are all pretty much the same kind of stuff. So we'll come back to this. This is just like the overview, and I can get into a little bit more detail in a sec. This is about creating an online brand for an individual person. It is not necessarily the same as you would do it if you were doing it for a company. And this is when you want to create an online brand. These are not all things you have to do if you're not specifically interested in pushing out that image of yourself. But if that is your goal, this is sort of the checklist. Being on Twitter, don't have to be on Twitter very much. Twitter to me is it's the yellow pages of people. If I can find you on Twitter, then you can share a little bit of information with me without me having to find you elsewhere. And you can say what your website is, you can tell me a little bit about you, you can kind of redirect me to the place where you want me to communicate more with you. Doesn't mean that you have to be on Twitter all the time. Simply that you have a profile, and preferably that you post a few things on Twitter periodically, so that you have that presence. I'm going to come back to other reasons that being on Twitter is very important, or being on any sort of cross-section of social media tools in a sec. Facebook, obviously. LinkedIn, tremendously important, if only so that when you're job searching, people can find you and find out where you went to school, what your skills are, that kind of stuff. For job seekers, LinkedIn is an essential, if incredibly annoying tool. It's not easy to use. To me, it's very dated, but it's where people go to look you up. Helpful to have a presence on secondary networks, have a website of some sort if you are in a field where that's relevant. Email groups, places like that. All of these kind of add together to create an impression of you. And I want to actually jump really fast to the online reputation thing, because one of the conversations that I have a lot is sort of, what's the use of being on social media? What's the use of worrying about your online brand, that kind of stuff? So I have 4 stories about challenges that people encountered with their online presence. None of them, I think, had ever considered themselves as having a brand or otherwise, so it doesn't need to be under that umbrella. But it definitely is about your presence online and your reputation online. So in one case, the state of South Carolina sells its, the mug shots, or makes them available, but I think they sell them to a company that then posts them in a way that makes them show up first in Google, so that when somebody looks up the name of someone that has been arrested in the state of South Carolina, the first photo that shows up is the mugshot. And you can pay to have them take it down, but it's there, and it will be there until you basically pay the extortion money. One way around that is to have photos of you, to have like a legitimate collection of photos that are associated with your specific name, so that people like that, that sort of troll, has a harder time abusing that that system. You can't have it taken down, by the way. Google has zero interest in that. And there are a lot of examples of this for companies as well. Companies often are basically extorted to have negative reviews removed on like review sites. I'm not, trying to think of like a good example of one, but totally blanking. But basically where people have come in and said, this is the worst site ever, this is a terrible place. And in some cases the site is really bad, but often it's just a scam on the part of that website to get companies to pay. So having an online presence that pushes that information off of the first page is terribly important. I'm gonna go a little bit further into that, and then I'll keep talking about the other examples.
Actually, I have an example of that second story.
Tell me.
In Greenbelt, Maryland, there's a restaurant called the New Deal Cafe, which has been supported by the entire community for the past decade. Well, a patron came in last summer and apparently had a grudge, wrote a really bad review about the place, and was trying to get his friends to also write bad reviews. So my girlfriend was like, no, we can't let this happen, because if this happens, if this review stays at the top, the New Deal Cafe will lose money, it'll go under, and we worked too hard for this. So let's get all of our friends to put positive reviews up to push this bad review down so it becomes invisible. And so they did.
Precisely. It's in the profession of online reputation management, that's called what is it called actually? It's called armoring.
Armor. As in putting armor on
making it harder for bad reviews to show up.
Okay.
And that's a response to somebody being negative, but it's also the same type of thing that you can do even before somebody's had something negative to say.
So what you're really suggesting then is that you have a defense system set up so that whenever there is a negative online review, you can turn to friends or positive reviewers who will then flood it and get it out. Okay.
Not just in reviews. You want to have, you want your online presence to be set up so that if anything bad does happen, you're prepared, because it's much harder to be reactive than it is to just have it set up in advance. As one of my friends who does online reputation management as a profession, he says, you want to be the majority owner of your reputation. You want to be the person in charge as much as possible. You're not going to be able to do 100%, but you can own most of it. The other thing that he talks about is how Google abhors a vacuum. And this is something that I think people don't necessarily understand. This is another story. So one of my friends, she's super fancy. She is like a VP at a very, very, very large bank. And she was talking with me about social media, and she's like, I don't want to be on Facebook. I don't want to have anything to do with any of that. I'm not interested. And I said, well, okay. But let's just go and make sure that you don't exist online anyway. Sure enough, when we went and looked, the first entry was her bank profile. The second entry was a conference that she'd spoken at. The third entry was something else. And the fourth entry was a story about a dance party that had happened years and years and years ago, but was still very relevant for her name. And she's in a photo in the article, like, you know, little raver chick. And that's not the reputation that she wants. Very difficult to get things removed, as I mentioned, but it's not difficult to push them down. And I want to go a little further into that. 53% of users do not go past the first 2 results of a given search. Not the first 2 pages, this is the first 2 results. 89% of users don't go past page 1. 99% of users don't go past page 2 of Google results. They make a joke. If you want to hide a dead body, hide it on page 2 of Google search, because no one will ever go. So if you can just push the negative stories down, that's very helpful. And the single easiest way to do that is to have a presence in social networks, because Google gives preference to those over other articles. Google does not care how old an article was about you. That will not work. You can't just put new stuff up. And because those older articles often have higher visits, it's almost impossible for you to have like a new article about yourself that pushes that off of Google search results. But what you can do is leverage social media. Have an Instagram account, have a SlideShare account. You don't have to put a ton on there, but that will help you push anything that's negative off of your profile. Now that's still reactive, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that you have like a profile for every single social media outlet, but it's certainly worth having a few so that the top several results are more likely to be those rather than something that pops up about you. I want to shift back to companies for just a few minutes because I kind of want to cover both sides of this. So about 80% of reputation damage comes from the disconnect that I mentioned between what people feel you should be delivering to them and what they actually receive. So basically your brand not being accurate and authentic. And that reputation risk has a really significant, clear economic impact. As much as 75% of a company's revenue is based on reputation. And this is a broad statement. So it can be a brand that you purchase, like a particular brand of shoes. Those reviews have a lot of weight, especially Amazon, but other places as well. It can be a broader sort of brand impression. So, do I feel good about this company? Do I want to support them? This is where a lot of the stories about, are you a socially responsible company kind of come in. Did you guys follow the SeaWorld story?
No.
No. What is the SeaWorld story?
Okay, so ask SeaWorld. So SeaWorld, this is a beautiful and sad example also of a disconnect between a brand and social media. I have it here, I think. So SeaWorld had this brilliant social media idea. They are going to have a campaign, Ask SeaWorld, on Twitter. And this goes back to this little spreadsheet here, the watch list stuff. People already have had issues with SeaWorld and SeaWorld not being careful with the animals that it takes care of. And internally, it should have been obvious to them that this was a factor. So on their watch list should have been something like, care of animals. So they did a Ask SeaWorld hashtag, and it blew up. Have questions about killer whale care, they asked, tweet us. And people responded with, if you're the leader in care, why did you allow Nanook's infections to get so severe it was fatal? If your orcas are thriving, why do you have to drug them with antibiotics? Et cetera, et cetera. So not being aware of kind of how their brand was perceived got them in a really negative position. It also came out at the same time that there was a negative movie. I think they've lost about 50% of their share price since this happened. So that's a very direct economic impact.
So the original idea of Ask SeaWorld seems to be pedagogical. I mean, was that what they were intending?
I think it was an engagement option. Yeah, it's a pretty common tool in social media to ask questions, to encourage people to participate. And done well, they can be very successful. There are so many other hilarious and tragic stories. I should just send that out to you for your own entertainment.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's often what it is the disconnect between what people are expecting and what you're delivering. But also, and importantly, it's the particular problem is that when you have that negative reputation, it can have a really strong impact on your bottom line.
Yeah.
To go back to the countries, when you have a negative reputation, it really does bring down your income in significant ways.
Well, has SeaWorld improved its practices with animals since then?
I'm just going to read some real quick statistics for you about online reputation.
Sure.
They're sort of in the process of trying to rebuild their reputation, but they would have to do a really significant rebuild in order to turn that around, probably. So here's, I'm gonna go through these real fast. A difference of 1 star in the average rating in a typical online business can lead to a 5 to 9% difference in revenues. Oh.
There we go. All right.
Back?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Lost video for a second.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're having a bandwidth problem.
So, are we back?
Yeah, we're back. It just the video's a bit choppy, I think, because the internet might be slow. So, not much I can do about it.
Is it on your side or on my side? I can move.
I don't know. It's probably on your side, 'cause I think the broadband here is pretty strong.
Okay, let me shift to another room.
Okay.
So give me just a sec.
Sure.
What's okay now?
Yeah, it's working now, Jasmine.
Pardon?
It's fine now. Now it's smooth. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's getting choppy though.
I mean, if you need to move, go ahead. But we're fine. We can see you.
It was just that
Okay.
spot.
Okay. So 72% of consumers trust online reviews as much as word of mouth. 89% of consumers conduct online research before making a purchase, and 89% trust online reviews. Consumers are 25% more likely to research online reviews for high-cost purchases in particular. So it makes this very relevant for some of those larger, more prestigious, more expensive brands.
So luxury goods and luxury services then will definitely live and die by reviews.
Mm-hmm. You'll actually notice that a lot of the higher end brands tend to, they have a fairly lean but very refined kind of online presence. And I always think personally, without data, that it's because they're very nervous about getting a negative reputation. So they don't do a ton. What they do is very elegant and very simple. So like when you go and look at more expensive car websites, they tend to have a minimalist kind of approach. Their voice tends to be a little bit more refined, a little more elegant. Less expensive brands tend to be more glib, more humorous, more charming. And speaking of that, let's talk a little bit about voice and about social media and about how to take your online brand into the world of social media.
Are you finished with the slides or not? Because they aren't coming up.
I am finished with the slides, so actually, let me, how do I exit out of that? There we go. I have 3 computers on my desk. All right, so we want to talk a little bit about the existing social media presences. We have only about 15 minutes though, right, Mariah?
20.
20?
And
right.
yeah, I mean, I definitely wanted to see if you could give an assessment of our students.
Yes. So I'm going to move into that. I want to go through a few really quick things and I'll do this in about 5 minutes. So
Okay.
When you do anything on social media, and I think you probably covered a lot of this, you want to make sure that you have an objective. And it can be a different objective, as you, I think, already figured out, based on what particular outlet you're using. But things like in the world of business, brand exposure, more customers, just a better reputation, all of those things. As an individual, it can be because you're looking for a job, because you're happy where you are, but you want to kind of have people pursue you. You can have it because you simply like being online, or because you have a cause that you want to advocate, et cetera, et cetera. If you're doing social media with a goal, it's helpful to define the audience that you're trying to reach. So while you might have many audiences, what's the core audience? Who are you specifically targeting? If it's for your business, are you targeting consumers? Are you specifically interested in new customers? Are you looking for reputation leaders, meaning people that I can say, not reputation leaders, what am I saying? Fashion leaders, people that are real influencers, etc. If you're looking at this from your own perspective, it might be that your core audience is a future employer. It could be simply that you want to eventually become active in a particular field, so you want to target people that are doing the work that you want to do eventually. Identify your audience. It helps you just check to make sure that you're communicating what you're really intending. And it's not that you can't mix and match a little bit, but when somebody looks at your Twitter feed, if you're looking for a job, they should see enough in that Twitter feed that lets them know that you're interested in the particular field that you're applying for, or that you're intellectually curious and you're kind of looking into interesting things, or otherwise presenting the brand that you want them to see when they look through what you've posted. And if you add in some kitten pics, that's okay. It's just a question of having it not overwhelm the rest of the content on that page. Also, do be aware that even if you set your privacy profiles, in Facebook, sometimes you'll miss something or a friend will post it and make it public. So be aware, look at your public profile so that you're presenting to an HR person what you want them to see. And then the next thing is, I would say, kind of define your type of tweeting, your type of Instagramming, your type of communication. You can mix and match these as well, and I'll send this all out. There's what I call the just the facts man type of person. You tend to tweet out articles, you don't necessarily add a lot of personal commentary, it's very direct, very information driven. There's what I call Grover Norquist tweeter, which might date me, but basically he's all about taxes. And so it's a person that picks one topic. And I believe one of you in your blog is sort of a little bit of this style where it's very much focused on vegetarianism, right?
Absolutely.
Is that one of you?
Huh?
Yes, that's me. I wrote that blog for a course that I took over the summer, and we had to blog about one specific topic. So that's why it is all that. Yeah. If I had my choice, I'd make it more diverse. But yeah, that's why it is so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's helpful to have kind of a theme for a blog in particular, and then add in personal tweets. One of my friends, he blogs about this sort of specific type of web technology, and then every so often he adds in like reviews of movies. It's hilarious, but it works. It works for him, Another one, actually he's a good example of this, is the work-life balance. So it's a person who includes one or two work professional topics with some personal commentary. And so that tends to be instances where they're kind of humanizing the story. So instead of just tweeting something, they tend to add in opinion, how this relates to them, or how it relates to a broader, bigger issue. The opinionator, very similar to that, but they add in very strong, vehement opinions. These people can be very funny and very entertaining. I find if you're not funny and entertaining, it's good to avoid this type, because certain people can get away with it and be very successful, and many people aren't successful because it comes out harsh when they do it. The enthusiast is a person who has a myriad of interests as well as professional sort of things going on, and so they just are all over the place. They can be very fun to follow though, because they sort of mix in a whole bunch of other stuff. And this, by following, I mean specifically on Twitter. It's also true on other sort of open social media outlets. And I do want to make that contrast between open and closed. So like, this is not relevant for Snapchat, but it certainly is relevant for anything where somebody can look you up and go to your page. A quick note on LinkedIn. it's sort of, like I said, I totally hate it, but if you can integrate what you're doing on social media into your LinkedIn profile, it can be a good way to generate interest when you're looking for a job, or when you're trying to sort of generate interest in something. Now, Mariah, have you guys talked at all about social media management tools or anything like that?
Like
Like
Hootsuite
Hootsuite?
and no, we haven't.
Okay.
Largely because I don't know about them. So if you know about them, go ahead.
So I use something called Hootsuite for managing like all of the social media outlets that I use. There are a couple of other tools. The main basic Hootsuite is free. It's fairly intuitive to use, and it's wonderful. It's so much better than using Twitter by itself. And I would say personally, it's also great for looking, Facebook used to be great, but they made a change and it's not working properly, so ignore that. But it's a great way of looking at streams and being able to schedule tweets, posts, etc. And you can post using Hootsuite the same post to both Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. So you can simplify the entire process. Again, you can schedule in advance. And if you don't want to do that, you can make 2 separate entries, also schedule those. It's a wonderful way to kind of streamline what you're doing in social media. There are a few other tools that will let you auto post anything that you have that you post on Twitter to Facebook and vice versa. I would say use those with caution, because if you get really engaged in Twitter, you can flood people on Facebook, and you can also end up tweeting out something that's too personal if you kind of go the other way. Does that make sense?
I should note that my strategy back in 2008 was the flooding approach.
Yeah.
So.
Flooding is good.
And I did that every day for 6 straight years. 1 tweet every hour.
Oh, wow. Every day?
Jasmine,
Every day, yeah.
Jasmine, have you ever heard of
That's a lot.
have you ever heard of GoDaddy's Get Found tool? Because it sounds a lot like Hootsuite, where when you just schedule one post, it goes to all of your social media platforms instead of just having to go in and connect with them. Do you know how they compare, or have you heard any feedback?
I don't know of anybody using that in social media circles, so I'd want to look a little bit more closely at what the offering is. But if it's doing that, then it's doing the basic core function of Hootsuite. Am I frozen?
Yep. Okay, now you're fine.
You're good now.
Yeah, you're good. Skype is weird. It does this sometimes, but yeah. Uh-oh. Nice picture, by the way. Skype. See here.
I think they've decided you can only talk.
Well, no. Yeah, let's see here. There we go. All right.
All right, well,
Okay, so you only see us.
yes. Let's do that. So I'm going to start with Sarah because I already looked at her blog. So in terms of social media, it's kind of hard to critique without having that conversation about what the goals are. So it's very difficult for somebody to do something wrong in social media if they're just communicating with their friends or with people in a similar profession or something like that. I do want to say as what I'm sure you guys already know, I call it the first do no harm principle. Don't put any information out there that you will regret. Don't say something that you will be embarrassed about in the future. So there are innumerable examples of people who've said things that they thought were funny and ironic, but were actually perceived as racist or sexist or just in bad taste. So when tweeting, when posting, etc., just, be aware. So first of all, Sarah, I like your photo.
Oh, thank you. What is this, Twitter?
Yeah, your Twitter photo. You're talking about Twitter, right? Not Facebook.
Yeah, there's not much.
About Twitter, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't going to look at the Facebook because what I will see probably won't be accurate for what you'd be showing to people that are your friends.
Yeah, the Facebook, I don't think you can view it. I think you can just see the background photo in my photo. I don't think you can see anything that I've posted.
Yeah. Now, just as a note, for Facebook, you can include things. Sorry?
Yeah, we can hear
I was
you.
saying,
Go ahead.
that for Facebook, you can include, you can post things that you want to be made more broadly available, and that can be a pretty, a useful thing to do. We want to make sure you're doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
Are we totally breaking down communication with?
Kind of.
Kind of, yes.
Okay, so
If you Skype for a long time, it does that sometimes.
here,
Yeah.
I'm gonna shift.
Actually, how about
Let's
this?
see.
How about we do a little reboot here? So I will stop Skype for 30 seconds and call you back. Does that work?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, good.
Why does it happen with Skype? It's like you can't have these marathon calls. Skype
I know.
it's like a horse that gets tired.
I know. You should do that. Okay, there we go. We got the video back. Let's see, okay.
All right.
All right. We can see you and we can hear you, I think.
Okay.
Good.
So just to go to Sarah's real fast, her Twitter profile, it seems very consistent with the blog that I looked at. So for me, like you seem to have like a cohesive kind of brand running through those medium. I don't know if that's your kind of primary focus, or as you were saying, something that you had just kind of had to do. But I think that's always helpful if you can have something that, even if it's a personal thing, gives you that memorable quality. So like I thought that was a memorable element of you, and it's always helpful in the kind of cluttered world of social media to have something that that people can kind of key on.
Yeah, I didn't mean to make that my focus on Twitter, but that just happens to be like the majority of things that I read or I share I'm interested in. And so because of that, most people who follow me on Twitter have to do with something vegetarian or people like with similar, because of that. Even though that actually wasn't my intention, I made it like to read news and share news, also for another class. But it just became like this thing, and I don't know, that's like I'll read something, mostly articles, and I don't really want to share it, and it all happens, usually about the same topic. So,
Vegetarian grand
Would
ritual. I like that.
kind of, yeah.
A lot of times what's in your profile is what's searchable, and so you have veganess in there, and that's a hashtag, so that's probably another element.
Yeah.
There are a couple of things that have been in my profile for a long time that I have all of these followers that have nothing to do with what I do professionally, but they found that search word.
Yeah.
So that might also be a factor. And the other thing with Twitter is sometimes you have to seek out the people that you want to interact with. So, for example, it's often helpful to look around your community, people that you know are in your town, follow them on Twitter, see who they follow, and particularly follow those that are in the location you're in or the location you want to be in, so that you have a geographic as well as a subject area connection to a whole set of people.
Okay.
Generally speaking, they'll follow you back. And if you're interesting, they'll stay following you.
Okay.
So
David, we're almost at the end of the class. Are you able to take care of Gwen and Laura? Briefly?
yeah, I have Laura pulled up here. Oh, so it looks like you've got marriage stuff going on. Is this right?
Yeah.
Yeah, she just got married, a few months ago.
Yeah,
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. September.
How exciting.
Yeah. So I think this reads for me much more like a personal site. This is my personal Twitter account, and I don't necessarily, it feels more like something that you're doing to sort of support your personal kind of interests and stuff. Is that true?
No, not really. I'm in the design field, so I wanted to make it. It started out as personal, but I'm trying to change it and make it more professional.
So what?
But
To do that,
go ahead.
To do that, you might want to pick a topic or two that is kind of relevant either to what you want to do professionally or something that you're really passionate about, that, maybe a volunteer activity or something along those lines. And if you just add that into your profile and then add it into a couple of the tweets that you post, it'll add some more kind of professional substance to it and balance out the personal, so you can have both, sort of. That would make you the work-life balance tweeter that I mentioned earlier.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So Jackie
Jackie and Daryl are not in class today, but I'm recording this, so if you give an assessment, I will show it to them.
Who's our third student? I don't have are you Gwen?
Yes,
Are you a puppet person?
I think so. I can't remember the last time I was put like that, but yes, I'm a puppet
Puppet person.
No, I only said that because one of my longtime family friends is a professional puppeteer.
Oh, wow. Well, I've never felt better. Who's your family member?
Her name is also Gwen.
Really?
That's what oh my
She's
God.
in Arizona.
Wow, okay. What are the odds?
It's so funny, but there was another Gwen, and I said, gosh, to the GoDaddy people, aren't people going to be confused? And they were just, they didn't even know. There was another Gwen who's a puppeteer. I think I might have seen her before too, and she's online.
Well, it's just what a funny, great coincidence. So yours reads very much like a business website to me. You are, it's personal in a sense, and I like that you have this photo of yourself, the puppet. So it lets me recognize you, and I would encourage you to maybe even make that, or some version of it, your profile photo,
Right.
because that's what shows up unless I come to your page specifically. And especially if you're doing anything, I don't know if you are, but anything where you're selling your puppets at fairs, etc., people like to be able to.
Oh, boy. Jeez. What happened?
Your video is turned off.
I know, it's ridiculous.
Oh no.
Yeah, or there's a number, or they call later on, like, and they're like, I'm like, oh, who is
She's
this?
about to tell me the most important advice of
I
my
know!
career.
And cut off right in the middle. Okay. You may not be able to reach her tonight.
Where is she?
She's in DC. I mean, the only thing I can think of is her internet dropped in her.
This happens to me all the time.
Really?
When I use Skype, yeah, some you have a really good day, and like other times it just you can't get the connection.
Huh.
So
I've never had this problem happen. At least not while I, in class.
Hey,
you're
okay.
back.
So,
Okay, your mobile phone is a working piece.
yeah, I'm not sure what's going on, but I think we're pretty close to the end of your class. So
Yeah.
I guess I want to ask if there's anything in particular that anyone wanted to ask.
Well,
And,
I think Gwen wanted you to finish the advice you're going to give her.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
it got cut off.
So, what I was saying is to make your image include your face, because I think that personalizes it, makes it a little bit less of a business, and makes it a personal connection type of business. And that's always very helpful. Beyond that, I thought actually it was a very nicely done site, so I think you got a good kind of setup going there.
Oh, thank you. It took me forever.
I like that you all had 3 different types of Twitter profiles, sort of representing 3 different things. So that diversity is good. What I would say to sort of tie it back to the online brands and everything is to make sure that what you end up with in your Twitter profile and what you're doing in other outlets is kind of supporting what your goals are. So if it's to like have an online business or a business where that's a component of what you're doing, that's great. If it's something where you're looking for jobs, if it's something where you're really just trying to be involved in a particular topic, each of those has a different kind of approach and style. What I can do is send you guys what I consider to be good examples of Twitter profiles of a few different types, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about.
Okay.
and also send the resources that I've mentioned. So to kind of give you a way of looking through, seeing what other people are doing that are generally successful.
That'd be great. Thank you.
And I'll include a document that's pretty dense, but it's basically if you want to be active on social media, this is like the setup process, the things you need to do, how often you want to update kind of stuff. So it's a good blueprint. It's a little bit of time investment, but it's a good kind of look-see, so you have a sense of how time-consuming, I should say, it can be, and also ways that you can streamline that.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else that you want me to include? Anything else where you've been like not sure about how to do something that I can add in?
Could you just include the parts, like there was a couple of slides where you had bullet points of things you should consider when building a brand?
Yes.
That page, yeah, that was a nice one.
Yes, I'll send the slides, but I'll also send 3 things. One, in addition to the stuff that I was just talking about, I'll include a link to a presentation that gives some good examples of social media fails. So you'll have a sense of like what I was, more detail around what I was talking about, mistakes people make. Also, sort of more broadly, things you need to be careful of when you are communicating online, and some things that people will tell you are, less successful when you're doing them online. Anything else that you need?
That's it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if anybody needs anything, just send me an email, and I'll shoot that over to you probably tomorrow morning.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for all your help, Jasmine.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Now, see, if Apple had bought Skype instead of Microsoft, I'm sure these technical problems would be solved by now. It's my personal assessment.
What was that?
If Apple had bought Skype instead of Microsoft,
Oh, yeah.
embedding these technical problems would happen.
But then you have the face-to-face FaceTime.
Yeah, and I mean that's why they wouldn't.
Yeah.
Skype was developed independently in FaceTime. And then what I probably should have done is downloaded FaceTime and put it on the on the computer. Yeah, but it is what it is. I was able to record everything and see what's in this documents, and I hope.